Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hormone Helper podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, your hormone helper from Fit for All Fitness. I personally coach over 1,600 men and women to help better understand their hormones so they can lose weight and get their metabolism back on track. With this podcast, you're going to hear from me and my special guests about everything from metabolism to thyroid to weight loss. And we even talk a little bit of sexy time as we chat to spread more knowledge thick like butter on your hormones. If you're ready to learn, I'm ready to share, so let's do this. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. For this week, I have a very special guest, Igor Klibanov, the CEO of Fitness Solutions Plus, and he's written some very awesome books like Stop Exercising the Way You're Doing It Now and The Mental Health Prescription. I'm so glad to have you on today, Igor. It literally feels like I saw you at CanFit like 3 days ago. Igor, you were actually like doing some phenomenal presentations, and I felt like in the audience, there's like kind of two types of coaches, like the ones who are like, oh my God, I'm getting everything he's saying. And then the others who are like, wow, this is some really advanced level stuff. But that's like where the good stuff happens. So welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Very well, thanks. And thank you for having me. Very excited about this. It's one of my favorite topics.
Excellent. Yes. So we are going to be talking a lot about kind of the transition through perimenopause. Now, a lot of people kind of listening into this podcast are initially listening because they're not sure whether or not they have hormonal issues. They're not sure whether it's just dietary or just lifestyle in general. So I'd like to first talk about what perimenopause is, because I feel like doctors don't really put like you're going through it. They're basically just like, this is part of your life. So like, what would you define in your experience as like someone going through perimenopause or that situation?
So, I mean, it's well established what menopause is, which is 1 year after a woman's last period. But perimenopause does not really have a clear definition. So the way that I will define it is that is the 5 to 10 years before menopause and 5 to 10 years after menopause, to make things a bit more precise, because we can't just say it's exactly 7.3 years. Here's how I define it. When a woman starts to get changes to her period, like leading up to menopause, that's when she initiates like the perimenopausal years. Once she completes the menopausal transition, in other words, she's no longer experiencing menopausal symptoms, that's what I'll call the end of the perimenopausal years and the beginning of the postmenopausal years. So that's kind of how I would define it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're basically talking about kind of like a specific time during the life where almost like the ovaries are in a position where they're just gradually stopping to work, essentially. And
It's kind of like a car sputtering.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it ideally it's consistent for everyone, but it's not. Estrogen highs, estrogen lows, and this is something that I feel like a lot of women get super frustrated with. But I've got to understand, like, where does your passion come from when it comes to topics like this? Like, what is it specifically about this that like has you so gung-ho like I am about hormones?
Yeah, people ask me why is a guy who's under 35 talking about, like women who are going through menopause, and where's my interest from? So the interest basically comes from my clients. When I was just starting my career, I was working in a community center and a country club where the vast majority of my clients were women going through menopause, and they had specific complaints, specific issues, goals, etc. And I often heard stuff that used to work for me in my 20s and 30s no longer did. And the only education I had at the time was just my certification, and I was just starting my undergrad degree, my kinesiology degree. So they didn't really teach this kind of stuff, during like that period of time of a woman's life. So I'm like, I gotta learn this on my own. So that's kind of where I pursued it. So I really wanted to get good results, and I just couldn't discount what my clients were telling me, even though the books were telling me something else, or just weren't saying anything about that time of life at all.
Mm-hmm. I love that. We literally share, I call it like my origin story, where like I feel like as a gentleman, it's tough to, sometimes have those conversations, like how regular are your periods, questions on stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
But it's so relevant because a lot of women get super frustrated with being at a point where they're like, I feel like I've tried everything, and they're like, some of the things that they're doing are actually really good. And it's like, okay, cool. Like you're eating well. Awesome. Like you're moving, but these are kind of the outliers that prevent people from being able to talk about it. So especially this time during the perimenopause years or cycle. Why is it such an important time during their lives for ladies to start focusing on their health and really dial down on their hormones and their metabolism?
Yeah, put it this way: there's no bad time to focus on it, but there's a few different reasons, from the logistical to the physiological. On the logistical side of things, usually between the early or mid 40s to the late 50s is when a woman will have kids who are somewhere between their teens and 30s. So life transitions, so possibly leaving the nest, going to universities, but also parents who are they're sick and aging and might be taken care of. So on the logistical side of things, there's those stresses. Um, on the physiological side of things, this is when she's noticing that things that worked well in her 20s and 30s might no longer be working well. Her periods might be getting irregular. She might have had a perfect, let's say, 24 to 32 day cycle, in ages 13 to 42, 44, let's say, and then she starts having an irregular cycle. There's more menstrual bleeding or there's less menstrual bleeding. Maybe there's skip periods and so on. And so she's not really sure whether she's in menopause or not in menopause yet or getting there. But also looking beyond the menopausal years, with the drop in estrogen, risk for things like osteoporosis starts to rise, risk for heart disease starts to rise. Like before menopause, the risk of heart attacks for men is way higher than for women. After menopause, women's risk of heart attacks is slightly higher than men's.
Interesting.
Osteoporosis is a lifetime risk, is way higher for women than for men.
Mhm.
Um, Both of them reach it. It just so happens that men die way before they ever get osteoporosis.
Story of
Um,
our lives.
uh, yeah, I mean, if men live to 95, 100, 105 years, there'd be more osteoporosis than men. But estrogen is absolutely necessary for bone density, bone strength, bone mass. And so when that declines, the risk of osteoporosis starts to go up, which is actually the title of my latest book, Osteoporosis Reversal Secrets. It literally just came out
Oh,
today.
nice.
Um,
Congratulations. That's exciting. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. As well, risk for different cancers starts to go up. Because of that, it's very, very important to be extra healthy during
Mhm.
menopause.
Now, all of these symptoms you're talking about are related to, well, the majority related to basically estrogen, right? I feel like a lot of
Yeah,
females, they either come in two cases. Their estrogen is really, really high, could be due to external factors, could be due to, physiological stuff, possible medication. In this case, we're talking about a series of estrogen low. Why is it that estrogen fluctuates so much outside of the cycle? Because a lot of ladies are wondering what's going on there.
yeah. The estrogen can really take a beating during menopause, and there's a number of reasons why it happens. The biggest reason, of course, is just what I call normal physiology. It's not desirable, but it is normal. And here's what happens before menopause: the three organs that make estrogen, the obvious one is the ovaries, but there's also the adrenal glands and body fat. And so the ovaries don't make estrogen anymore after menopause. So because of that, estrogen dips low. But also because the adrenals really try to compensate for the loss of estrogen from the ovaries, what the adrenals do is they release cortisol, and that's potentially a desirable effect. They also release estrogen. So the adrenals are just working overtime. So all adrenal hormones are being amplified during this time. So yes, estrogen is being amplified, so that makes menopause a bit easier. But also cortisol is being amplified, which kind of counteracts some of the effects of estrogen and other hormones for water regulation like aldosterone and others, which is why certain women experience puffiness and bloating more so during menopause without any changes in nutrition. But without getting too complex, there's something called the steroid hormone pathway. And it's to simplify things, it's a biochemical pathway. And to listeners who are the lay people, the way I would describe a metabolic pathway is like this: it's kind of like an assembly line. One compound or chemical becomes something else, becomes something else, becomes something else, with the help of certain, let's call them intermediaries, cofactors, spark plugs,
Mhm.
something like that. So, for instance, cholesterol is the mother hormone to both cortisol, but also estrogen and testosterone. And so, if the cholesterol gets converted to a different hormone called pregnenolone, pregnenolone goes down one side and can make, through a series of steps, can make cortisol. But it could go down the other side and can make testosterone. Testosterone gets converted to estrogen, estradiol, as well as the other estrogens. So if the adrenals are making a lot of cortisol, there's not enough raw material to make estrogen. And that's why a lot of women have extra low estrogen during menopause. Like in general, estrogen is low during menopause, but some women are lower than what's supposed to be for their age, and very often it's because cortisol is high.
I think the interesting thing too is when you talk about the adrenals outputting so much from the cortisol side, that also is extrapolated if someone is in high levels of stress, if they are under chronic lack of sleep to the point where it's overputting and now they just don't have enough on this side, right? And
Yeah.
the thing is like a lot of these ladies, they're going to go to the doctor and the doctor is going to do just a random generic blood work, right? And they're going to look at, maybe your thyroid, they'll maybe put that on there. They might do like a T3 T4 and they'll say you're mid-range, you're low, doesn't matter, but you're within that large bracket and it's done, right? But is
Yeah.
it really done? Is that really the end all be all of what their hormone situation can be?
No, I mean, with my menopausal clients, I like to see a way more thorough hormonal picture of what's going on in their body. So it's good to run thyroid. I love it when doctors run T3 and T4, but that's rare. The only thing I'll usually see is TSH. But even if it is TSH, T3, and T4, even that's inadequate. I'd also like to see things like free T3, which is number one for me. Also T3 uptake, TPO and TGB antibodies. And that's just on the thyroid side of things. I'd also like to see on the other side of things not just estrogen, but also progesterone and testosterone. Ideally salivary, not just blood. They tell you different
Mm-hmm.
things. But I'd also like to see cortisol as well as the other markers of adrenal health, things like sodium, potassium, leukocytes, and so on. That gives me a much more comprehensive picture of what's actually going on in a woman's body during
Mm-hmm.
menopause. And I'm actually glad you brought up the thyroid because there are so many people who will complain to me
Their
that
thyroid is
I have all
slow.
the symptoms of
Yeah.
thyroid, but when I run my test, everything comes back as
Mm-hmm.
normal. Why is that? Usually the most common two most common reasons. One, the reference range is too wide.
Mm-hmm.
It varies, lab to lab, but it's somewhere between 0.35 and 5.5, somewhere there. That's really, really wide. That's like saying a normal bench press is from 25 pounds to 400
Yeah.
pounds. If you can't do 25 pounds, you're very, very frail.
Love
If you
it.
can do more than 400 pounds as a woman, you're a world class powerlifter. But that's what it's basically saying. Um, that's problem number one. Problem number two, maybe the TSH is fine, but the free T3 and T3 uptake are not where they should be. So basically, just inadequate testing is run. And the ultimate marker of thyroid health, I think, is those two: free T3 and T3
Mm-hmm.
uptake.
I think that's really important that people become more educated into what to ask for their doctor as well too, especially now that like average doctor has about 6 to 8 minutes with each client, sometimes if they're lucky, right? And you really have to
Yeah.
be clear about what you're asking. And the interesting thing that you talk about asking for all of those in a blood work is really from that comprehensive picture. You're asking for like, I want to see how the hormone is created, what is going to what location. So when you talk about that chain being branched, how much of this chemical is actually being, or this hormone is being allotted to those right places? Because that'll give you a good idea, like you're looking for, and what I look for, as to, okay, where is this going? Where is all of this actually building out, which could explain the estrogen issues as well too.
Yes, that's exactly my thought process. So my approach is basically here is how estrogen is made, and then let's see where along the assembly line,
Mm-hmm.
the chain is it broken. And once we have a specific issue, we've identified a specific break. That's when we can actually use certain targeted supplements,
Mm-hmm.
etc., to correct that. So that's why when somebody asks me what's a supplement that raises estrogen, I'm like, there's many
Mm-hmm.
supplements. For example, if a woman has anemia, correcting that anemia will also improve thyroid, will also improve estrogen. But if there's no, in which case, iron would be an estrogen raising supplement.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's no anemia, iron won't do that. So that's why there's no generic estrogen raising supplements. They're just what's broken. And is anything broken? Those are the two things we often have to look at.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important too, because like I spend a lot of time just focusing on the food approach. However, there is a limitation as to what food can do, and I know that this is why medication exists. This is why supplementation exists. So I guess with that, if people have a really really good diet, they're eating healthy, they're eating like they're making the attempts there, but or looking for things that they can do in addition, whether it's through supplementation or even things that might be of a greater benefit. what supplements do you think like are actually good, or which ones should they absolutely like steer clear and dodge, save their cash for something else?
Yeah. Before we
Yeah.
touch on the supplements, and I will in a second, um, if somebody's goal is to have as comfortable of a menopause as possible, I say address the boring basics: sleep, stress management, exercise, nutrition. Just addressing those four things that will, for 80+% of women who are experiencing menopausal symptoms, those will either decrease in like a lot or go away entirely by just addressing those four boring things. Now, for the 20-ish% or less for whom those four basic boring things don't work, there are a few supplements, medications, etc., that have been proven to work. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a pharmacist. However, I will say this: most surefire way is just
Yeah.
estrogen, straight up estrogen. Now, of course, you can't just get that over the counter. You have to speak to a doctor or pharmacist about that. From a supplemental perspective, one of the most tried, tested, and true ways of raising estrogen is soy isoflavones. Um, there are a lot of supplements out there that claim to raise estrogen, things like fenugreek, things like calcium D-glucarate, DIM, which is diindole
Mhm.
methane, etc. The only place where they're proven is, to my knowledge, petri dishes.
Nice.
Um,
Classic.
and that's not to say, yeah, that's not to say it's not going to work in a person. There's mechanistic evidence of how it could work, but to my knowledge, there's not a single study showing that women, not petri dishes or rats or mice, women took these supplements and their estrogen
Mhm.
increased. So as far as I know, the only one that has great proof behind it is soy isoflavones, and one that has so-so proof behind it in people is hops. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
all the others, fenugreek, CDG, calcium D-glucarate, DIM, diindole, methane, have no proof in people.
Interesting. When you mentioned doing the boring basics, I was like, preach, because I feel like so many people now are conditioned into a place where they just want to take the quick thing as opposed to fixing the other 90%. But like
Yeah,
you had talked about with the adrenals, shorting on sleep means you're shorting output. Having excess amounts of stress means you're overputting in terms of those adrenals.
yeah,
Having the lack of nutrients means you might not be able to build the hormones that you're looking for. All of those things really do cover the foundations. I'm glad that you brought that up because that's really, really important. It's not a, like the word
yeah,
supplement means, in addition of, not in replacement of. And I think a lot of people forget
absolutely.
that 100%, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. Yeah, I can't tell you how many people are literally looking for the silver bullet or the magic pill. The magic pill will help you if the other things are taken care of. Now, if these other things aren't taken care of, it may or may not.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to give yourself the best possible chance of success, do the boring basics, and then if whatever issue you're working on is still not resolved, then try a
Mm-hmm.
supplement.
Now, something, and I actually got this question from a client before hopping on here, which I've been seeing a lot of lately, and I don't know if you've been seeing a lot of this. People who are either on thyroid medication or have been on birth control for a really, really long time, their metabolisms are changing. Right, birth control and
Yeah,
normally something as basic as levothyroxine has been prescribed for years. Could be a multitude of things, not just for not having kids, or there's a ton of different uses for it, but have you been seeing that that has been kind of an overprescribed thing, or even that clients' bodies are changing as a result of being prescribed that for so long?
the birth control is a whole big can of worms. I actually did an entire hour and a half presentation about it at the Canopy Pro
Yeah,
conference.
I literally
Um,
probably missed that. I probably did. Was it on Sunday? Oh,
yeah, that was
damn
a
it! I
Sunday.
was.
I think it was first thing in the morning. They put it at like 8 a.m.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, very often birth control can mess things up. Now, I'm not saying don't use birth control. I'm definitely not saying get off birth
Mhm.
control. Again, I don't know the listener, the viewer. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a doctor, so speak about all that to them. There are definite benefits to birth control, so I'm not saying go off of it. But every medication also has a list of side effects. Some of the biggest risks to birth control is depression. Now, it's a bit ironic that sometimes women take um, birth control to alleviate what's called PMDD,
Mhm.
premenstrual dysphoria disorder. So they actually have depression only during the progesterone dominant phase of their cycle and no other time. Sometimes it just doesn't work, or sometimes it actually makes it worse.
Mhm.
And it's really just about the pharmacist or the doctor playing with different birth control pills and the estrogen and progesterone ratio. Um, But often high estrogen levels, and what's the main ingredient in birth control is ethinyl estradiol, which is much more powerful than human estrogen. High estrogen can actually suppress the thyroid. So you'll often see the two go hand in hand. Birth control and levothyroxine or brand name Synthroid or Troxin or something like
Hmm.
that. Um, so yeah, there. I'm not saying don't take them. I'm not saying there's no benefits to them. There are definitely benefits, but there are also drawbacks. There are ways to minimize those drawbacks by speaking to a pharmacist about what was called drug-induced nutrient depletions. Most medications deplete certain nutrients, and some of the side effects that come from those depletions. Some of the side effects that come from depletions. So I'll give you an example. One of the most common depletions from birth control, and almost all of them, whether it's Yaz or microgynon or any of the others, is vitamin B6
Hmm.
as well as B5. Um, B6 is necessary for the production of serotonin. And so if you're taking birth control, but you're experiencing depression as well, speak to a pharmacist about possible supplementation with B6. Antidepressants will often deplete, ironically, melatonin. So you have insomnia, so you have depression, and so you take antidepressants, and then your insomnia is worse.
Interesting.
Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, so speak to a pharmacist about concurrently taking melatonin with your antidepressants. I'm not saying take melatonin with antidepressants. I'm saying speak to a pharmacist about taking melatonin with antidepressants if you're having problems sleeping. Now, if you're sleeping just fine and you're taking antidepressants, don't worry about
Hmm.
it. Um, but if you're not sleeping well and you're on antidepressants, speak to a pharmacist about that.
it's it's interesting because obviously people listening to this are probably like, oh, my medications are now scaring the crap out of me, right? But like it's important for like the viewers to understand that, just like Igor said, like when a doctor makes a decision to put you on something, they are weighing what are the potential side effects versus what am I looking to help fix with this person. So yes, they fully understand that some of these side effects are possible and not everyone experiences side effects, but also as well too, once prescribing it, they're like, I'm based off of the symptoms that you are experiencing now, we are going to take possibility of achieving a few of these side effects to overall get rid of the immediate issue. And that's kind of why a lot of these things are prescribed. And like Igor said, it's important to take a look at dosage regularly. It's important to make sure that your medications are still working if they're working, and that you should have regular communication with your doctor about that stuff. So I think that that's an absolute great thing.
Yes, and what I would also add is a doctor is a very strong part of your healthcare team, but don't neglect people like naturopathic doctors, like you, Andrew, soon to be,
Mm-hmm.
as well as a pharmacist. Pharmacists are what are called one of the hidden golden nuggets of conventional medicine. Doctors are not very good when it comes to supplementation. Doctors are great with emergency medicine, cancer referral to specialists,
Mm-hmm.
oncologists, neurologists, and so on. Where they're not great at is supplementation. They don't study it very well. And outside of things like vitamin C or vitamin D, they don't really know much about supplements. But pharmacists do. Pharmacists often give patients way more time of the day than doctors. And they have a big, giant, massive book that will tell you here's the supplement, here is the drug, here are drug nutrient interactions, here are drug herb interactions. If you're taking this medication, then it makes sense to take the supplement, but don't take this one because that's going to mess you up. So put a pharmacist on your healthcare team.
That's so interesting because if you were to ask that, like, who is your pharmacist? No one knows. No one knows. Like
Yeah,
it's probably a different person every time because they probably just go and get it
yeah,
filled
exactly.
wherever. So I love that. Having a pharmacist as a part of your team. I like that.
Yeah,
So that
very underrated.
I want to kind of go back into like the eating right and the doing this naturally. So maybe we can give some kind of more action steps and get some stuff clear for people. So like you and I know that, but like many people, they just kind of opt for the quick pill, they call it a day. But from like an activity perspective, if we were to start with that first, um, anything that they can do in terms of activity to improve their overall hormone profile or even to just improve their metabolism.
Sure. On the topic of improving metabolism, lots of myths and misconceptions about that. But from an activity perspective, not a heck of a lot that you can do to improve your metabolism. People say increase your muscle mass and improve your metabolism. Tiny little
Mhm.
bits. They don't really quantify that. How much does improving muscle mass improve metabolism? 1 pound of muscle burns an extra 6 calories per day. It's not a heck of a
Crazy.
lot. So you got to build 10 pounds of muscle to burn extra 60 calories per day, which is not a heck of a lot. The biggest factor when it comes to metabolism is simply thyroid function. If your thyroid is already healthy, and that's not just your TSH, but also free T3 and T3 uptake, then there's not a heck more you can do to improve your metabolism. Um, as much as two-thirds of your basal metabolic rate is simply just keeping your body temperature. That's it. For every degree Celsius that you're below your ideal temperature, which is 36.5 to 36.8, you're burning between 10 and 13% fewer calories. So if you measure your body temperature first thing in the morning and your temperature is 34 and a half instead of 36 and a half, you could be burning about 25% less than what we predicted by calculation formulas. Um, so the biggest factor when it comes to optimizing your metabolism is just normalize your thyroid function. That's it. Will exercise help? Sure, but nothing as much as normalizing your thyroid function. Um, Having said that, what could improve your hormones during menopause from an activity perspective, from an exercise perspective? A combination of cardio and strength training. Um, I'll also throw this one in, although there's not as much research on it. It's just an opinion. Stuff that you actually like to do. You know, if you like dancing, it might not cross the threshold of what it takes to be cardio, and it's definitely not strength training. But if you like to do it, it reduces your stress, and you're moving around. Your heart rate is, your pulse is, I don't know, 105, 110 during that. Go for it. If you like playing soccer, pick up a game of soccer. If you like, if you want to try new things, if you want to go rock climbing, if you want to go swimming, pick that up. If it's not just about the physical benefits of exercise, it's also about the social and mental, psychological benefits of exercise. Other than that, if you like everything equally, or more like you hate everything equally, what you can do is just a combination of cardio and strength training. So maybe 1 or 2 days a week you do strength training, 1 to 3 days a week you do cardio. As for cardio, like a lot of readers are asking, or sorry, readers,
Mhm.
listeners or viewers are asking, what cardio should I do? The type of cardio matters a heck of a lot less than your pulse during your cardio. So whether you're cycling at, let's say, 130 beats per minute, or you're running at 130 beats per minute, or you're rowing or swimming, etc., at 130 beats per minute, the effect on the heart will be virtually identical. There will be some differences in muscles, but there will be the identical effect on the heart. And so, what I'll tell everybody again, if you like everything equally or you hate everything equally, cycle through them. Maybe one day you do your run, the next day you swim, the next day you go on elliptical. Or even in the same workout, you could do 10 minutes of cycling, 10 minutes of rowing, 10 minutes of swimming, finish it off with a swim. Um, so there's no right or wrong way to do cardio, as the single most important variable is the pulse. I cannot emphasize enough. With strength training, the single most important variable is also the intensity. And what does intensity mean in terms of strength training? I'll define that. There's two possible definitions, but I'll define it like this: proximity to muscular failure. How close do you think you got to the point where you could lift a single more rep? In other words, if you're doing curls and you finish at 10, how many more do you think you had in reserve? If you think you could have done more than three more, it's too light. If you think couldn't have done any more, it's probably too heavy. You want to be somewhere in that 1 to 3 reps in reserve range.
Mhm. This is where I feel like a coach like you and I really comes into play, and making sure that people have the good guidance. I feel like people under push themselves. One, fear of injury. That's pretty common, right? Nobody wants to get into it and go, absolute pedal to the floor, and then all of a sudden break something or tear something. But also, too, I feel like people, when they're getting into it, it's like, I'm good here, right? 4 reps in,
Right.
great, let's scroll, right? And it's like that lack of pushing yourself really it doesn't challenge your body enough. And you know being able to vary it is really, really great, but also making sure that you're challenged the right way, that's incredibly important too. So I love the fact that you brought that
100%.
up.
In all of my books, all my articles, with all of my clients, I always harp on this. The name of the game is progression. Try every single workout, try to make something at least a little bit objectively harder than it was the last time. For example, you can add 1 rep, you can add 1 pound, you can reduce the rest periods, you can increase the range of motion through which you're moving through, you can increase the speed or decrease the speed. Both are forms of progression for different reasons. There's 8 or 9 different forms of progression. Just pick one that seems almost inconsequential and just stick with that one until you can't improve on that anymore. Then pick a different variable to improve, and then keep cycling through the different variables. That makes it objectively ever so slightly harder. but subjectively staying the same, because basically you're going to make progress. Your body's going to get stronger in response to a stimulus. So even though something may be objectively harder, subjectively it'll be about the same, maybe even easier.
Hmm. And that's really, really important, making sure that you're always finding that thing for you to be able to challenge yourself, right? And if you don't have a goal now, now's the perfect time to sit yourself down and say, what are the goals that I want? And it doesn't just have to be physically, but what are the goals in health? What do you want to be able to achieve? Because it's really important that you're on top of that. um, Now, through this process, perimenopause can be 4 years, 7 years. It could be forever in some people's minds.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that's going on during those years typically, right? People have their first kid, also
Mhm.
another change of hormones. People probably go through either a major life transition, some like getting a new job where they're kind of taking care of a kid, sleep deprivation is at an all-time high, and all of that excess fluctuations kind of coming all at once. Um, to people who are like, I've got 50 things on the go, like, where do I even start with this? Where would you start
Yeah.
someone it like going into this? Like, I need 1 foot on the ground. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, this is kind of a little bit of a time management or a prioritization that I kind of coach my clients on. And it's a very, very simple system that I kind of used intuitively, but I'm like, oh, other people don't use this. Um, so I started teaching my prioritization system with my clients. And then first I did it myself. Then I read about it in the book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mm,
I'm like, oh, so I guess I'm not the only one, but there's a lot of people teaching this. Um, but it's basically that system, which is first do what is important and urgent. Next, do what is urgent but not important. Next, do what is important but not urgent. And next, do what is not important and not urgent. So there's no deadline, or the deadline is far away, and whether you get it done or not won't have a big impact. Once you prioritize it that way, you knock off the big things off your list. You'll feel a great sense of momentum to keep doing more things off your list. Positive momentum breeds more positive momentum. Um, that's one way to approach things. Just get the big things off the list. The other way to approach it is get the quick things off your list. Maybe it's not important and not urgent, but it might only take you 30 seconds to do. Knock that off your list first, then do another thing that takes you 30 seconds, and before you know it, two things are off your list. And again, you already have yourself some positive momentum. Ideally, what takes you 30 seconds is also important and urgent,
hmm
but that's not always the case. So kind of start there. And in terms of exercise, a lot of people have this all or none mentality. Either I exercise for an hour, 6 days a week, or I don't do it at all. I always say a 5 minute workout is better than a 0 minute workout. Um, a lot of the lifelong successful exercisers that I've interviewed or that I've worked with, they'll say, I might not have the time, but I'll figure out some way to squeeze in, a few squats, a few lunges here and there. I'm waiting in line at the bank, or I'm waiting in line for, um, you know, uh, get my passport renewed or whatever. I'll do a few squats. I don't care if people are looking at me. Um, Easy things to fit some kind of movement into your day. I'll park my car further away from the entrance. I'll take the escalator instead of the elevator. I'll take the stairs instead of the escalator. So simple things like that to work activity into your day, not just formal exercise, but activity in general. If you can do formal exercise, that much better. But every little bit helps.
Like, it's crazy because I think the first thing that people always ask us, like, I don't know about you, but I get 50 million questions every time I go anywhere new and someone figures out I'm a health coach. Oh my, it just open fire, right? What do you eat? What is your thing? And I'm like, this isn't a blueprint that you're going to copy and then think that something's going to
Yeah, yeah,
change, right? But people are often mind blown when I tell them I only work out 4 days a week, but I've done it consistently my entire
yeah,
life. So like, great.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's, and they're like, oh, not more. It's a no, because I do it 52 weeks out of the year. And that's exactly,
Yeah,
it's consistent. I can do
yeah,
it. I love it. That's it. But it's so interesting that you talk about that all or nothing mentality, right?
yeah.
And it's,
Same here. I mean, the longest break I've taken from exercise in the last 25 years is 4 days. And that's because I had a surgery to get my wisdom teeth
oh,
removed.
lovely.
And the surgeon told me to take 3 weeks off. And I'm like, he doesn't lift. I'll take 4 days off. And that was it.
Yeah. And you're just like, just don't clench your jaw as you're like squat.
Pretty much.
Oh,
Well, the reason he told me 3 weeks is I was doing martial arts at the time. So I wasn't supposed to get any punched in the face.
okay. Yeah. That doesn't help either. A
That,
foam
that I
helmet,
agree
but
with. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
What martial arts did you take?
I did a few different ones. Back in the day, I used to live in Israel, so back there I did traditional
Okay.
karate. When I moved to Canada, the first club I was in, it was a style called Kempo karate. After that, it was a Filipino style called Sikaran, which is what I'll call a Filipino version of Taekwondo. So lots of
Okay.
kicking.
Wow. Nice. So
Yeah,
that's it's interesting. The more I learn about you, the more I find in crazy similarities. So I was big into Muay Thai, big into Jiu-Jitsu for a really long time,
cool.
till I took a kick to the back of the head, and I was like, this is not for me anymore. Like it's
Yeah, I
one
hear
of those. I was
you.
like, I value my facial features too much, and that's nothing like going to a client and having a black eye. So that's just not doesn't
Yeah,
fly.
totally. I took after I finished martial arts, I did powerlifting for 12 years, kind of seven non-competitively, five
Wow.
competitively. And after I retired from powerlifting, I'm like, I really miss martial arts again. So I took 3 classes in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
Nice.
got 3 injuries, and I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah, I'm sure it was either ankle, knee, or rotator cuff. One of the two.
Uh,
Oh,
wrist, knee, and shoulder.
close, close. So yeah, from all of the locks. So interesting. I always thought that
Yeah,
that was good. But this has been a huge experience, and I appreciate obviously so much you coming on and talking about this, because a lot of ladies are in this, like, kind of what I call the abandoned hope stage of their life, where they're just like, I'm just gonna
yeah,
forget it. This is just who I am now, and I'm just gonna sit on the couch and Netflix my way to numbness, right? So it's really great to be able to
yeah.
focus on that for people looking in, because I know you said that obviously we talked about some of your books and you have the new one coming out. Where can people get a hold of you, or where can they connect with you, to be able to, whether it's learn more information about the books, or even use you as a resource in their health journey? Where can they find you?
So I'm really really bad with social media. I'm like an 80-year-old inside a 35-year-old's body. But basically, I'm very good with email, so people can reach me there. And if people want a free PDF version of my book called "Stop Exercising the Way You're doing it Now," they can visit www.fitnesssolutionsplus.ca/stop exercising. And this way, they'll also have my email address, and they can reach out to me and again get the free PDF of my
That's
book.
amazing. I'll make sure to drop that link into the show notes, Igor, so then that way people can find it. And I appreciate you so much in doing that for the PDF, because Igor has really been so. One, for those of you who do not know what CanFit is, essentially CanFit Pro is, I would say, the kind of health body that is in Canada that's really responsible for making a lot of health movements in the industry. They train a lot of coaches and trainers. They're always providing new education, and Igor, I encountered him as a presenter there, and he's incredibly knowledgeable, not just about the
Thank you.
supplements and the information, but you care a next level above your clients, which is really important. And it's the way that you like show up and answer those questions, which is really great. It's one thing to just be a coach and say, hey, like, I feel like many coaches are just 3 sets, 10 reps, take
Yeah,
this copy of a plan I gave somebody else type of thing. And we have to stop that in the industry. And educating people like this is where we go through this process.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fantastic. Menopause is funny enough one of my favorite topics to talk about. I can go on forever. Yeah, so it's always a treat when I get to talk about it.
I appreciate it, and yeah, like, I mean, I'm hoping that again, if you're open to it, we can even have you back on the podcast on a later date, possibly to talk about birth control, because I get flooded with questions like that,
Absolutely.
and I don't always have all of the answers for it. So, but yeah, so there you have it, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Igor, so much for coming on. I will drop all of Igor's links in the show notes. And remember, we are here as tools of support. So whether you're unsure if you have a hormone condition, whether you're not sure if it's something metabolism, or you're even trying to figure out where to get started in your health journey, this is what coaches are for. We are here as a part of that team, to be able to, of course, help you with your health and your fitness. And sneak that little PSA reminder as well: add a pharmacist to your healthcare team. So thank you for that. I think that was super valuable too.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.
So, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it seems I'm all out of info juice for today. That's all for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Please leave a raving review for me if you've learned something good, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're in the mood for some more great content and tools to get your hormones on track, why not check out our free Facebook group and the blog on our site. We do amazing weekly trainings in our group that me and my wife call Tea and Teachings that give good tips for anything hormones and metabolism related. It's also a great community where you get to share your goals and success with like-minded people just like you. I'll make sure to drop both the Facebook group link and the blog link in the show notes for you. Or if you're ambitious like me, the name of the group is Weight Loss and Balanced Hormones. It'll say Fit for All beside it with a picture of me. So come and join us and have more fun.